Well, I hope that's a good luck.
I heard it, but I don't know where it's going.
The Committee on Homeland Security will be in order. The committee is meeting today to receive testimony on examining DHS's efforts to improve processing for international visitors. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Good morning. I want to begin this hearing by thanking Congresswoman Dina Titus for bringing the committee to Las Vegas to examine how the Department of Homeland Security can improve visitor processing. Congresswoman Titus is a leader in Congress on this issue and a champion for Las Vegas tourism because she knows how critical it is to this community and its economy. Las Vegas received over 42 million visitors in 2019. After dropping off due to the pandemic, the numbers of visitors is on the upswing. Harry Reid International Airport saw a 66% increase in passenger volume from March 2021 to March of this year. The number of international passengers increased 800% during that time, though it remains below pre-pandemic numbers. As travel continues to resume, it is essential to let visitors know that America is ready and welcome their return. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to see firsthand some of the good work TSA is doing here at Harry Reid International Airport to develop new innovative technologies for its checkpoints. I also observed some of the enhancements CBP has made in recent years to strengthen and facilitate international visitor processing. Improvements like these are essential to not only strengthening security and serving as a force multiplier for TSA and CBP personnel, but also improving the passenger experience. A good experience at the airport gets a visitor's trip off on the right foot and makes them more likely to want to return. I hope to hear from our TSA and CBP witnesses today about the progress they've made and what more can be done as travel rebounds from the pandemic. I also look forward to hearing from our Airport and Las Vegas and Convention and Visitors Authority witnesses about what the federal government can do to help. Finally, I want to commend the men and women of TSA and CBP, Harry Reid International Airport, and all those who have worked tirelessly under extraordinary difficult conditions while during the pandemic to keep the traveling public safe and secure. We appreciate your hard work today and every day and recognize that without you, American travel and tourism would not be possible. With that, I thank the airport for hosting us today and recognize the gentlewoman from Nevada, Ms. Titus, a tireless advocate for the people of Las Vegas on this committee and in Congress for any opening remarks she may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing your committee here. I know you have a lot to do with the other committee that you're chairing, where we always see you on TV, but we know also you're quite a champion for TSA and what goes on in Homeland Security. And thank you, Reverend Cleaver, for coming from St. Louis, Missouri, and that part of the central part of the country to join us today in Las Vegas, and I really appreciate it. I'm glad to have you here because you'll get to hear directly from the people at the airport and know that what I've been telling you all this time is really true because you'll hear it straight from them. And the work that they do here to help our hospitality industry is just incredible. And I was glad you got to have that behind-the-scenes tour of the new security system here at the airport because we are really leading the way with that technology. You know, when I used to go through this airport to Washington on the weekends, there'd be 3 or 4 people on the plane. It was just very eerie. And now air travel is really making a comeback. But we still have a way to go. And with the 191 international passengers just last month, we want to be able to meet the challenge. And so that's why we want to be sure we have enough people, enough technology, and are ready to say welcome. In 2020, CBP introduced simplified arrival processing with biometric technology, and that's one of the ways that we're kind of leading in the field. But unfortunately, when travelers get here and the numbers spike, CBP, we realize, lacks the personnel needed, and believe there's a shortage of about 900 CBP officers across ports of entry. So we need to do everything we can to strengthen the workforce by hiring more personnel and working to mitigate these shortfalls. As you'll hear from our witnesses, as the trend increases, excuse me, don't know why I can't talk this morning, and more tourists come to our city, their trip does begin at the airport. And if you have a bad experience there, it kind of tempers the way you feel about the rest of the trip. So we're proud to host the nation's only TSA innovation checkpoint, and that's again got the latest technology. And so we're doing all the right things, but we know we need to do more, and so that's why we're having this hearing. The President has recognized this increasing demand, and you see that reflected in his new budget. And I'm also pleased that there's a great increase from last year of $1.4 billion. So that will certainly be helpful. And that includes $105 million for checkpoint property screening systems and $19 million for own-person screening algorithm development, whatever that is. I'm sure we'll find out. In Congress this past month, I was proud to vote in favor of a TSA workforce bill led by our chairman, recognizing all the service that we get from TSA and improving their conditions and pay and benefits. So I think we have a great partnership here. I want the committee to hear about it, and we want to learn from you ways that we can make it even better. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. In my other life, when I used to come to Vegas before I was a member of Congress, I enjoyed myself. And after becoming a member of Congress, I was given what was called a back of the house tour at the casinos to kind of show me how things operate. So I was privileged yesterday to see the back of the house tour here at Harry Reid International Airport. And I must say, not as many bells and whistles at the casino, but you get it right. So I was very impressed with what I saw, and obviously I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on exactly what's going on. So other members of the committee are reminded that under the committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. Members are also reminded that the committee will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in our February 3rd, 2021 colloquy regarding remote procedures. I now welcome our first panel of witnesses. Mr. Carlos Martel is the Director of Field Operations for U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Los Angeles Field Office. In that capacity, he oversees all CBP operations in the greater Los Angeles and Las Vegas area, including here at Harry Reid International Airport. Ms. Carolyn Burke is the Transportation Security Administration's Federal Security Director for Nevada. In that role, she's responsible for ensuring the deployment, management, and oversight of people, processes, and technology to improve security operations, including here at Harry Reid International. Without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted in the record. I now ask Mr. Martel to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Cadco, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today to discuss U.S. Customs and Border Protection's efforts to facilitate international traveler processing. Facilitating safe and legitimate travel is one of CBP's core mission objectives and is carried out by CBP's Office of Field Operations at 328 ports of entry nationwide and 16 pre-clearance locations internationally. Our role is not only a critical component of national security, but also a significant driving force of the country's economic prosperity. The global pandemic caused significant damage to multiple private and government entities that depend on international travel. Travel restrictions to to minimize transmission, along with traveler fears caused by the pandemic, resulted in 2 consecutive years of international travel decline. Today, both commercial and personal travel across our southwest land border have returned to pre-pandemic levels. Travel across the northern land border continues to increase, but is still only about half of pre-pandemic levels. And in the air environment, as of May 1st, international travel remains 29% lower than this time in 2019. The pandemic's impact on CBP operations has been substantial. Limited travel sharply reduced our collection of user fees, a key resource supporting the cost of CBP personnel. Thanks to the funds provided by Congress in fiscal year 21 and 22, CBP has been able to sustain our critical travel operations. U.S. COVID-19 travel restrictions have been replaced with a vaccination requirement for non-U.S. citizens and non-immigrant travelers, an action that is contributing to increasing international travel. As this trend continues, CBP stands ready to welcome visitors back to the United States. As part of our preparation efforts, CBP has been accelerating the implementation of several initiatives to maintain the highest standards of security while transforming the international arrivals process to attract visitors, increase travel confidence and safety, and provide a streamlined travel experience. I'd like to highlight some of these efforts for you today. First, CBP continues to leverage pre-departure screening capabilities and programs. Traveler screening at the earliest moments of potential travel is important for CBP to identify and prevent inadmissible individuals or persons who pose a risk to the United States from reaching our physical border. Second, the ability to identify and separate low-risk travelers from those who may require additional scrutiny is a key element in CBP's effort to facilitate and secure international travel. CBP's trusted travel programs, namely Nexus, Sentry, Fast, and Global Entry, provide expedited processing upon arrival into the United States for pre-approved, low-risk participants through secure technology, exclusive lines, and automated kiosks. CBP's trusted traveler membership topped 10 million in March of this year, with nearly 8 million enrolled in Global Entry. To support growing membership, CBP continues to improve the enrollment process and member experience. We have recently implemented remote interviews for renewal of Global Entry memberships and expanded enrollment on arrival. Since October 1st of 2021, CBP has completed 52,000 remote interviews and 160,000 enrollment on arrival interviews and is working to accommodate increased demand for these options. Third, CBP has been integrating biometric facial comparison, touchless, and mobile technologies into its entry processes, including Global Entry kiosks and simplified arrival, to verify identity and streamline processing, mitigate pathogen transmission, enhance security, and protect the privacy of all travelers. CBP also offers automated passport control and mobile passport control that allow travelers to enter their biographic and travel-related information prior to inspection, either via a kiosk or mobile app, to streamline processing. Additionally, the CBP One mobile application enables foreign travelers entering the U.S. by land to apply for an I-94 prior to arrival, review their travel history, and check their I-94 expiration date on a mobile device. In the air environment, a new CBP One feature offers air travelers the ability to provide advanced information regarding hand carry of biological materials and/or live pets, streamlining required document and inspection processes. And finally, CBP continues to strengthen our partnerships with industry. For example, in 2020, CBP at Harry Reid International partnered with the Clark County Department of Aviation to establish and promote the Touchless Initiative, aimed at providing faster, more secure travel experience and restoring public confidence in air travel. Together, these initiatives, processes, partnerships, and technological innovations streamline the arrival experience and promote the public health of travelers while simultaneously advancing CBP's ability to facilitate legitimate trade and travel and identify those individuals who might present a risk. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. I now ask Ms. Burke to summarize her statement for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear to discuss the steps the Transportation Security Administration has taken and continues to take in 3 key areas. 1, to improve the passenger experience. 2, to enhance security while travel volumes are increasing. And 3, to foster collaboration, innovation, and acceleration of action through the Innovation Checkpoint here in Las Vegas. As you all know, airports throughout the United States are often the engines that drive tourism, business activity, and the local economy. That fact makes ensuring airports function effectively and efficiently and securely all more essential. To be successful in that endeavor requires strong partnerships with our public and private stakeholders. Our panels today are representative of those very partners, and we are proud of the work we have done together to make this airport successful in serving the traveling public. During the calendar year 2021, TSA screened 585 million travelers, about 1.6 million per day, which represented 69% of the pre-COVID pandemic levels. Las Vegas has recovered even faster at 78%. As those volumes return, enhancing security and the passenger experience is really essential. TSA is focused on strengthening checkpoint operations through ensuring we have both the personnel and the technology needed to counter the ever-changing threat landscape. TSA is grateful for congressional support for its investment in personnel and innovative technologies to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of its operations while improving the passenger experience. Some examples of key technology that helped achieve this: first, computed topography, or CTs, which produce high-quality 3D images that can be rotated 360 degrees for a more thorough visual analysis of a carry-on bag content. These CTs are frequently housed within automated screening lanes, or ASLs. They provide key process automation capabilities that enhance the security checkpoint experience. These features allow for higher throughput, fewer bag jams, and improved passenger experience. Second, advanced imaging technology, or AIT. This equipment safely screens passengers for both metallic and non-metallic threats, such as weapons and explosives, without physical contact. Enhancements to the threat detection algorithms lower the false alarm rate, which is exciting because it means fewer passengers are going to have pat-downs, and there'll be less false alarm rates, which will improve throughput and the customer experience. Next, credential authentication technology, or the CAT machine. Many of you probably experienced that already. It automatically verifies identification documents presented by the passenger and confirms the passenger's flight information without having to look at the boarding pass. All these pieces of equipment and more are housed in the Innovation Checkpoint. The Innovation Checkpoint was established in September 2019 and unveiled in Terminal 3 here at Las Vegas. The Innovation Checkpoint, which some of you had the opportunity to visit yesterday, has an excellent example of public and private sectors working together in tandem. Partnerships with our airport director and the Clark County Department of Aviation, as well as local industry, continue to make this checkpoint one of TSA's best options for continuously improving screening technology and procedures to advance both the passenger experience and security effectiveness. The Innovation Checkpoint is a one-of-a-kind checkpoint that serves as a demonstration site for TSA to assess multiple processes and technology requirements within a live checkpoint environment. It truly is one of a kind, I think, in the United States and maybe even the world. In closing, we're grateful for the support of Congress that has enabled us to continue to advance and improve technology and the tools that we're able to provide to our TSOs and the workforce that ensures the secure and efficient screening of passengers. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
I thank the witnesses for their testimony. I'll remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the witnesses. I now recognize myself for questions. Let me say the two I had yesterday was quite informative. As I kind of commented, some of us remember the pat downs, the puffer, the backscatter, and we've come a long way. And the Innovation Center was wonderful. the seamless processes between the airlines and CBP for passenger boarding is tremendous. And so I compliment the whole team here at Harry Reid for the job you're doing. So the question is, are there some other things, Ms. Burks, that you think members of Congress could do to enhance this continued technological development as you see fit?
Yes, I think there are two things. Maybe most important at this point is the issue of pay equity for our employees because of the fact that we're struggling trying to hire. It's very important for us to have a very professional workforce that is well compensated. And I would tell you, Nevada is probably a good example. Here in Las Vegas, we've been able to hire to the number that we've needed. But in Reno, I have not been able to hire almost a single person, and we've been working for probably the last 8 months in order to try to recruit. And it's because of the competition from companies that have established themselves in Reno that pay $3 or $4 more an hour, that have benefits as good as the government's. And also, Tesla would be an example, even provides stock options. So to compete against that's very difficult. Across our system, I know we're having some of the same problems. So your bill, HR 903, would be excellent for us in order to be able to continue to move forward. In addition to that, of course, yesterday I showed you that we have lots of great technology that we need to continue to fund to be able to roll out and refine. Some of the money that's been approved will allow us to make some of that equipment just be even better than it is right now. And with that support, I believe there's no stopping. The passenger processing in the airport will be very exciting as opposed to people sometimes not wanting to go through it.
Well, thank you much. You'll be happy to know that all the members on the panel voted for HR 903 so that our TSOs can not just become part of the federal system per se in terms of pay scale, but we need to treat them like we do the majority of other federal employees, and this would be a way to do it. They would receive a 30% increase in pay right off the bat if that bill passed, and that challenge you're having probably in Reno might not. Your member here, Ms. Titus, has been very, very helpful to us in that situation, but it's the right thing to do. I was impressed with how the TSOs took pride in explaining the technology. And, I felt kind of bad saying, but we really ought to be paying you a little more. So, that's how you really appreciate an employee. You pay them. And so we all support that. Mr. Martell, COVID-19 has affected the ability to process international travels. How has CBP addressed those challenges?
Sir, internally, this CBP has worked very closely with DHS and with HHS to establish protocols in terms of keeping our employees safe, keeping our employees well informed on social distancing protocols, acquiring personal protective equipment, hand sanitizer, to ensure that all the employees operating within airports, seaports, and land border port have the equipment that they need to not only keep themselves safe, but to keep travelers safe. We've also worked with port authorities, with facility managers in disinfecting our workspaces, especially doing more redundant and more frequent disinfections in high traffic areas like our secondary admissibility areas. We've had a robust campaign in educating the staff in terms of keeping themselves safe not only at work but at home. And we continue to do that as we're progressing through the pandemic and as we see the various iterations of the variants that occasionally spike in different cities. But we have a very robust platform, a very robust response for ensuring that we are adhering to all of the recommended guidance from the CDC, keeping our employees safe, and ensuring that the general public understand that we are here to protect them as well.
Well, thank you very much. I thank both of you for your responses. I now recognize the gentleman from California for 5 minutes, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleague, Ms. Titus, for inviting us to her district. Must say there's an allegation that before I got to Congress, I also had a life, and I may have visited your city way too many times. So I can imagine a lot of those bricks that built these buildings probably have my name on them. But I represent Southern California, Anaheim Angels, Anaheim Ducks, and Disneyland. And our lifeblood in my district is tourism. Disneyland by itself accounts for about 20,000 direct jobs, 99% of them being union. And so COVID really devastated our economy. Mr. Martel, your testimony, you stated the facts, which are we've gone from travel restrictions based on country to global vaccination requirements for non-U.S. citizens coming to the U.S. As we move to a possible spike here in the summer season of COVID-19, what can we do, first of all, to keep our employees, our travelers safe in terms of coming into the U.S.? What else can we do as federal government? And number two, how can we get the message out to the rest of the world that we continue to employ very safe standards when it comes to COVID-19 and that we continue to be open for business?
Sir, thank you for your question. Again, to reiterate, I believe that we have implemented robust protocols internally in concert with CDC in keeping our employees safe. I think that for purposes of communicating that to the public, we will continue to have a messaging campaign to ensure that the public is well aware of what the requirements are. It's a known as to how COVID-19 or its variants will affect us in the immediate future, but we do not anticipate any reversal, or I'm not aware of any reversal, any change to the current vaccination policy. So I don't see us reverting back to previous travel restrictions.
And Mr. Martel, if I can interrupt your answer, the majority, the number one international source of travelers to my district is from Mexico. And I get a lot of phone calls from people from outside the country saying, can we travel? What do we need to do? And so there's still a lot of apprehension about coming to the U.S. as tourists, because folks are not quite sure whether, even if they have a visa, if they're going to be able to get past the border to get into the U.S. So I'm trying to figure out how we can help you, help our industry, tourist industry, get the message out that if you have your vaccinations, you can come to the U.S.
Sir, I believe that can be done in concert with DHS, CBP, and Department of State, and all of the agencies that are involved in granting visas or in fostering, encouraging travel, getting the message out that essential and non-essential travel is allowable from Mexico so long as the travelers have vaccinations. I think it would be a messaging campaign that we could do internally with the consulates, the affected consulates, but I think there could be a broader messaging campaign that perhaps members of Congress could support.
Would you say there's a role there too for private entities like the U.S. Travel Association, Vegas Travel Association, OC Travel, to have a coordinated message that makes sense to folks wanting to come to the U.S. and enjoy what we have to offer?
Yes, sir, I believe that would be beneficial.
Do I have any time left?
One more question.
Ms. Burke, just wanted to thank you very much for pointing out the obvious, which is pay equity is important for our employees. And I say that because of hiring, not only hiring, but retention. We want the best trained, the most experienced workforce taking care of our society, protecting us. Beyond pay equity, is there anything else we can do to make sure you can retain your workers?
I believe some of the technology that we have talked about and we showed off yesterday, if you were able to yesterday hear some of the TSOs speak about the experience that they have with passengers as they're going through equipment that makes the process easy, quite seamless, they're excited because the passengers are happy. So their environment will be improved significantly in working with our public if the equipment is continued to be procured and able to be distributed. It's a game-changing situation that we've got with the improved technology, and it's not going to be that long a period of time before we are able to truly change the experience that the passenger has. So I think if you had pay equity and you also had what I would call an improved working environment because your passengers are happy, that's probably the very best formula we have.
Thank you, Ms. Burke. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, for 5 minutes.
Let me first of all thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing. I'm excited about it, and I have to control my excitement because there's so many questions I want to raise. And I thank our colleague, Ms. Titus, for inviting us here. I did a wedding in Mexico Friday, and I came back yesterday and landed at DFW. But before I left Mexico, I had to take a COVID shot. a COVID exam. But when I landed in Dallas, nobody asked me for anything. I walked just right through after I went through customs. Customs did not ask for anything. Did I miss something, or did somebody mess up? Because there were 7 people in my party, and none of us were asked to give the paperwork. You're not responsible. I'm just trying to find out what is required and what is not.
Sir, thank you for your question. No, I do not believe you missed anything. Our current travel policy, the airlines are responsible for adjudicating vaccinations. So upon your arrival, our officers would not necessarily ask you whether or not if you've had a COVID shot.
Okay, thank you. I feel better. Now, secondary, look, I'm not Fred Flintstone, but I'm not troglodytic. But the biometric technology is amazing when I read about it. Are you hearing any apprehensions about the same thing we heard about taking the COVID shot, that this is an invasion of my privacy? I ought to be able to do what I want to do and so forth. And when somebody, I think voice recognition, I think visual recognition, and probably something else I can't even remember. But are there any concerns or complaints as we move into this technology era? Either one.
Sir, from the CBP side of the House, not a lot of apprehension or concern. Obviously, there are travelers that opt out and decide that they do not want to subject themselves to facial comparison. But for the most part, and based on my experience within my field office, the traveling public have been very receptive. In fact, they actually like the ease with which they can be processed through facial comparison, as opposed to having to go through the administrative process of presenting documents or having to pull identifications out. We've heard nothing but good things from the traveling public as well as stakeholders and airlines on the efficiency that biometric technology has done to improve air travel.
Thank you. I'm wondering, this is obviously a high traffic airport We're opening up a new airport in Kansas City, hopefully. And it seems like we've been working on it for 36 years, but I think we're scheduled to open next year. And I am hoping, at least, that we're thinking futuristically, and how can we make this one of the most secure airports in the country. Or there, if someone asks you some suggestions on technology that would make it a smoother place through which travelers went, what would you suggest, Ms. Barrett?
Well, there have been several airports that have had major renovations or new airports, and we are able to really have, for instance, airport directors come here to visit, and we put them through the innovation checkpoint so they can look at all the new technology. Now, it depends upon how big your purse is, but if you had the ability, for instance, to purchase some ASLs to go along with the CTs or AITs that are more advanced, you can donate those to TSA and be able to install them in your airport. We, at this point, don't have all the funding available to be able to do that in every place, but the airports can take that initiative, and many of them have, whether it be a Salt Lake or LaGuardia or other places that have very new facilities. They've been able to develop funding and be able to donate that equipment at the highest technology that we have.
Do you happen to know whether KCI has come through?
They have not been through here yet, but I certainly invite them, and would love to have anybody who's interested in getting a tour, because I think it's so marvelous to see the kind of progress that we've been able to make and the opportunity that's there.
I'll make sure they make the request, and I'll come back with them. Try to get it scheduled at a time when the Temptations are going to be in the show. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Mr. Langevin from Rhode Island for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. I'll begin with Mr. Martell, if I could. CBP reported a 97% match rate for biometric processing in FY 2021. I wanted to know, what are the false positive and false negative rates of biometric identification systems in use at U.S. airports? And are there certain factors that cause these rates to increase for certain passenger groups? And thank you for holding this very important hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Sir, with regard to your question, I would have to defer to the subject matter experts to provide a technical response with match rates and what goes into how people match versus how we have mismatches. We can certainly get back to you on that, sir.
Okay, I'll look forward to those responses. I think understanding those false positive and false negative rates are very important, so we have confidence that the system is working as it should. How about Mr. Martell or Ms. Burke? For what duration and with what security controls are in place does DHS store biometric passenger data?
Well, TSA has a policy with regard to any of the information from biometric processing that we, as soon as the passenger leaves that TDC position, we delete the information. So we do not maintain it at all, which from a privacy standpoint, we felt was the best position to be able to take to make sure there was no concern.
I see. So no storing of data whatsoever?
No.
Okay. Well, that answers my question. I think that's something else that's very important for privacy concerns. As well, I thought there was going to be a cybersecurity risk here, and I wanted to understand the level of risk and the degree we were taking extraordinary steps to protect that information. But if we're not storing it, all the better. Mr. Chairman, I think those are my questions for right now. So I'll yield back and balance my time. Again, I thank our witnesses for their testimony today and the work that they're doing. behalf of the country. And Mr. Chairman, again, thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martell, did you want to respond to the other half of that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sir, I would say for U.S. citizens, the images that go into the cloud are deleted in short order or immediately, but they are kept no longer than 12 hours by policy. And for visitors, it's the same accord, but they're kept no longer than 14 days. We have protocols in place to ensure that these images are being deleted from our systems. We have audits in place to ensure that process is being done not only internally but by the carriers that may possess that information for purposes of boarding people biometrically. And we have conducted and have privacy risk assessments to ensure that we have all the proper encryption security protocols in place to ensure the privacy of international travelers.
Thank you very much.
Chair, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The chair recognizes our host Congress member, Ms. Titus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. All this technology is great. I think I am a Luddite. I'm not sure about the Reverend, but I'm low tech, so I appreciate what all you all do. But I want to take a step back before you encounter the technology. With international travelers, here at Harry Reid, they often these planes land in the middle of the night. And then the people are left on the tarmac because there's nobody to receive them, nobody to check their papers. They wait for hours. This is not a good experience as we try to increase international tourism. I think that we'll hear from the convention center, they've even offered to pay overtime to get some of the officers there so people could be processed sooner. Is there any way, I would ask you, Mr. Martell, to have some kind of collaborative agreement so we can get people to be there and check people in, and then they can take advantage of all this technology? But we got to get them off the plane first to have somebody there to greet them.
Ma'am, thank you for your question. Yes, well, we work very closely with the airlines as well as the convention center to ensure that any air carriers or flights that are coming in not only have approved landing rights, but that we're coordinating the arrival time so that no one is left waiting on board and people are allowed to come into the Federal Inspection Service area. We historically have adjusted our hours when requested to help accommodate that. But we've also established the reimbursable services program here at Harry Reid. So in the event that a flight is arriving well before or well after hours outside of our normal operating hours, there is a mechanism in which the airline through the Port Authority can pay for the staffing that's needed to clear the flight. Again, we do our best to try to do that on shift or with our own resources, but when in situations where we need to, we will rely on the RSP program.
Can I add to that, Ms. Burke?
I believe with arrivals, we actually staff 24 hours a day, and we look at flight schedules beforehand so that we know exactly what carrier arrival patterns are, so that we're in a position to be able to have people available to do any processing. Perhaps an international group has a connection and they're going on to another destination. We will always have the staffing available because of the fact that we do staff 24 hours a day. It's far more limited in the wee hours of the morning to have passengers to process, but that's certainly one of the things we take great pride in, working with the airlines closely to make sure we know those schedules, and if there's any deviation, they notify our coordination center so that we can adjust and make sure that we have adequate people.
Well, as we try to get more international flights into Las Vegas, I think that'll be important that we maybe look at those arrangements, see if we can enhance them in any way. I know that TSA works well with pre-check and all, but we've heard more complaints about global entry. And one of the problems seems to be the backlog in the application process. Some of that was COVID, some, I don't know, maybe you can address it. Mr. Martell, are you trying to do anything about that backlog? Have you gotten it down? How can we help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. CBP has been working on addressing the backlog. We've done this through remote interviews for global entry renewals. We have been advocating enrollment on arrival at over 100 airports. So, as I said, we've processed roughly 160,000 travelers that way, but we're also expanding our enrollment centers. So we're opening up new enrollment centers at different locations. And within my AOR, we're opening up 2 new enrollment centers to help adjudicate and reduce the backlog. So we're actively involved, and that's happening across the nation at different ports of entry.
Okay, thank you. One last question, going back to Mr. Langevin, talking about the privacy and the technology. It's often whack-a-mole. You come up with a new technology, and then the criminal elements learn how to take advantage of it, and then you got to keep moving. Have you had this experience? How do you deal with it? Is it a problem? Both of you?
I was going to say for TSA, we continually test. In fact, an example that we gave yesterday was we had law enforcement come with a bag full of fake credentials, and some of them very sophisticated. And the equipment that we have and the software caught every one of them. So the ability to be accurate has gotten to be very sophisticated, and very limited opportunity for people to be able to access with fake credentials.
Ma'am, on the CBP side, I agree with Ms. Burke. Our technology actually has improved our ability to detect imposters, to detect false documents. The facial comparison technology is phenomenal, and it rules out the human error part. So I would say, if anything, this technology has been put in place to enhance security and to ensure that we are addressing those very same concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes gentlelady from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rep. Titus, for inviting us. I wish I were there. I wish I had the opportunity to see all of the things that you're talking about, because I don't have that technical vision in my head, so I need to see it for myself. But I do have a couple of quick questions. Mr. Martell, when I first got on this committee, Mr. Thompson used to raise this question of biometrics and inaccuracy as it related to identifying people of color as to who they are. Have things changed so that there's less error? Because I haven't heard Mr. Thompson ask about this question today, and I'm just wondering, has something remarkably improved so that that's not an issue or a complaint? Mr. Martell?
Ma'am, I'm not entirely informed or knowledgeable on that particular issue. I can certainly look into it and get back to you on if there's been any differences with regard to how the technology works based on color.
Thank you. What about you, Ms. Burke?
I also would have to refer to the technical issues and or the experts, and would be glad to get back to you with some information.
Thank you. So, Mr. Martell, Mr. Cleaver asked you a question. He said that when he returned from Mexico, no one queried him as to whether or not he had his COVID vaccines or a COVID test. You commented that people coming on international flights have to be vaccinated, but that didn't happen in his case. Is that because he is an American citizen? Or did I misunderstand your answer to this question?
No, you did not miss it, ma'am. That is correct. He is.
So you're an American. I'm sorry. You're. What's correct?
Ma'am, the vaccination requirement at airports, they are the responsibility is placed on the airline to ensure that any documents that are required are in order. They do that in consultation with the CDC. So upon arrival in the air environment, we would not necessarily ask for that information.
So even the international travelers that you said must be vaccinated in order to come into our country, you don't ask that. By the mere fact that they came in on that airplane, that airlines is already taking care of that issue. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay. Last kind of question I have is, and that's for both of you. Are you both really understaffed? And if so, to what degree? I want to know how to be helpful.
Ma'am, from the
Are you
CBP.
down 500? Are you down 900? Are you down what?
On the CBP side, ma'am, in terms of the staffing, the actual vacancies, I would have to get back to you with those actual numbers. What I can say is that although we support the president's budget, as international travel resumes, and as passenger counts meet or exceed pre-pandemic levels, CBP could certainly or can always use additional staffing.
Thank you. Ms. Burke, could you respond?
Yes, first I'd respond locally to say that, again, what we did was to overhire at McCarran so that we could loan people to Reno. So we've balanced out between our state the resources that we need to be fully staffed. From a system standpoint, and I could not give you an exact number, but we have many large cities that have had many of the problems others are having and trying to hire. And so we are under what would be an ideal amount of manpower, and we are doing our best to spread the resources, as I've done in Nevada, across the entire country. So we may have, if somebody has an overage, we may share that with another airport in order to bring them up to a higher level of staffing. And that's kind of our mitigation plan as we go into this summer. But solving that problem long term.
We'd have to pay an additional cost associated with moving that employee, right?
Yes, you would have an additional cost for that period. It's a short-term solution, and hopefully we'll find the longer-term solution with the bill that has been proposed by Mr. Chairman Thompson.
Thank you. I certainly am in support of that bill. Thank you. I think my time is up. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Chair. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Dimmons, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And look, as a former police chief, I won't confirm or deny how many times I have been to Las Vegas, but I do appreciate Ms. Titus for hosting us today, and so appreciate our witnesses and Chairman, as always, thank you for your leadership. I too represent in Orlando, Florida, one of the busiest airports. I was also assigned to Orlando International for several years as a police captain. I was assigned during 9/11. So I've certainly had an opportunity to work with CBP, as well as involved in the formulation discussions and plans for the TSA. So this subject is, of course, very, very important to me. And we are so excited about the technologies. It certainly has changed the way that we now do business in terms of employees being able to be much more efficient, I think effective, but also in terms of our level of security. But I certainly believe that our most important resource is and always will be the boots on the ground, the men and women who do the job. And Ms. Burke, I've heard you talk about some of the challenges in terms of pay with some of the private corporations that are much more enticing. I understand that in Orlando, like Las Vegas and Los Angeles, the cost of living has certainly increased. And the general schedule locality pay has failed to reflect local market conditions. So I would think that as persons are looking where they're going to work or where they're going to live, that certainly comes into play. So I'd love to hear from both of you how that has affected your ability to recruit. But I'd also like to hear a little bit more about your attrition rates and what are some of the other reasons that the men and women of your various agencies will stay or leave.
Well, let me go first, if I might. In Nevada, our locality pay is between 17 and 18%. Now, if you are in California, it's much higher. So sometimes we pull people from California that want to work in Nevada, and one advantage we have, it doesn't match the California rate, but we don't have state tax here. So every state is unique with what it has to offer in the way of a total compensation package. But we find that most of our workers we hire locally, they are established in Las Vegas, they intend to stay here. We have, with the rates of pay being a challenge, found that our turnover rate has been up over 25% in a number of months this year. And it goes in spurts, but we have been able, we're a service-oriented kind of city, and so we do have a number of workers who are anxious to be hired by the government. We still have very strong benefits to offer compared to some other of the casinos, et cetera, in comparison. So I think that's why we've been a little more successful here in being able to hire, just because our packages can be quite good. But other cities, that's not true. And so again, the bigger problem, it really has to be addressed in a different way than just the individual situation here in Nevada.
Thank you. Mr. Martell?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. Well, I can tell you from my experience in the Los Angeles field office, we did struggle many years ago with hiring individuals into Los Angeles on these national announcements that recruited people from other states. About 3 years ago, we began a local campaign to hire Angelenos or people that reside in California as opposed to doing national announcements. And in addition to that, we also began a heavy recruiting of veterans through our veteran recruitment announcements. And I can say that really turned our vacancy rate and offset our attrition rates tremendously. We carried an attrition rate years before of 10%, sometimes more, based on our inability to hire people because of the cost of living in Los Angeles. I'm happy to say that today I'm fully staffed, and not only fully staffed because of the local efforts by the men and women of the Los Angeles field office who are involved in our recruitment efforts, but we have a very healthy and robust pipeline for the coming months, the coming year, in terms of people who are ready, available, and have passed our preliminary requirements for employment. But to your point, ma'am, that does continue to be a challenge nationwide. I think that each field office does things differently, but from the Los Angeles perspective, we've really taken a local approach to not only recruit people from the greater Los Angeles area, but also capitalize on the men and women who have proudly served our country and our armed forces.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I believe my time is up. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields. Let me thank our first panel of witnesses. You have been thoughtful. You've laid it out. Thank you very much for the work you do on a daily basis. As I said, I saw firsthand the good work, and I look forward to that good work continuing. Our committee feels very strongly about your missions, and let me say that the question both the last two individuals kind of asked, and you gave the right answer, but said, do you have everything you need personnel-wise and money-wise? And you did a two-step. just like we expected you to do, but we understand. But we have to ask the question, and I appreciate your answer. The two-step gives us exactly what we need to know, and our commitment to you is to give you exactly what you need to do your job, and I assure you that we'll continue to do that. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll excuse you, and we'll ask our second panel of witnesses to come forward. And after that, they assemble. We will get a young lady from Nevada, Ms. Titus, an opportunity to introduce them. Thank you very much. Young lady from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a real pleasure for me to introduce to you these next two witnesses. First, we have Kate Wick, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, LVCVA. In this capacity, she's responsible for directing and overseeing efforts to promote travel to the world's most desirable city, Las Vegas, for leisure and business travel. Previously, Ms. Wick spent nearly a decade with MGM Resorts International to develop their global brand strategy and consumer outreach. So I'm eager to hear from her about how the Convention Authority is positioning itself to begin this renewed push for travel internationally and nationally. Our other panelist is Rosemary Basiliadis, you met yesterday, who's the amazing Director of Aviation for Clark County. This is a role she's held since 2013. She oversees all operations at the airport, as well as 4 general aviation airports in North Las Vegas, Henderson, Jean, and Overton. Notably, she's the first woman to hold this director position. She's been deeply involved in aviation activities in and around Las Vegas for years, including serving as an appointee to Nevada's Homeland Security Commission. As a member of the Homeland Security Commission, she has had an inside look at how we do things in Nevada, and especially in the aviation space. So I think it'll be very worthwhile for this committee to hear from her. So I present to you Ms. Wick and Ms. Basiliadis.
Thank you. Thank you. Without objection, the witness's full statement will be inserted in the record. I now ask Ms. Milk to summarize her statement for 5 minutes. Ms.
Thank you.
Wick.
Yes, thank you. Chairman Thompson, Representative Titus, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share relevant information on Las Vegas tourism as an input to your larger review. I serve as the Chief Marketing Officer for the Convention and Visitors Authority here. Our mission is to attract visitors from all over the globe by promoting Las Vegas as the world's most desirable destination for leisure and business travel. For context about the size and scale of Las Vegas, of the world's 20 largest hotels, more than half are right here in Las Vegas. And across the entire destination here, there are approximately 150,000 rooms to fill, roughly 20,000 more than Orlando or New York City, for context. Tourism is our #1 economic driver. Pre-pandemic, tourism provided $36.9 billion in direct economic impact and nearly $64 billion in total economic impact per year to our economy. Las Vegas is more dependent on hospitality employment than any other large metro area in the nation. And this reality was magnified over the past 2 years. In the depths of the pandemic, our unemployment rate exceeded twice the national rate at peak. The pandemic crippled our local economy and crippled our community. And specifically, when visitation does not flow, it affects the livelihood of the estimated 2.3 million residents.
Thank you.
Managing through the pandemic has been anything but business as usual, and I'm happy to report that 2021 occupancy levels ended the year roughly 20 points higher than the national average. Visitor volume rebounded in 2021 to 75% recovered, and as of last month, visitation has recovered to roughly 85% of 2019 levels. Compared to the overall picture, however, the international segment has been slower to recover. In 2019, we welcomed 5.7 million international visitors, accounting for 13% of our total visitation. Pre-pandemic, this resulted in $4.8 billion in direct economic impact and $8.3 billion in total impact. Preliminary data suggests that international visitation in 2021 was just over 1 million travelers. That's about 20% less than pre-COVID volumes. Pre-pandemic, Las Vegas regularly hosted more overnight international visitors than any U.S. city that is not a major port of entry, and ranked as the 5th top U.S. destination for international visitors. Providing air service access is critical to the overall destination health and to realize the full impact of tourism. As of this June 2022, domestic air service to Las Vegas will be more than fully recovered. In fact, Las Vegas will soon have 12 more direct domestic flights than June 2019. That said, we still have more work to do. International air service to Las Vegas will only be 79% recovered in international capacity and will only recovered 70% of international markets. This continues to be one of our top priorities, and there's a simple reason why. International visitors spend 40% more on average than domestic visitors. International visitation supports both business and leisure segments for us. For more than 26 consecutive years, Las Vegas hosted the most top U.S. trade shows, and trade shows are global in scale. As one example, CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, typically they welcome over 1/3 of their attendees from international markets. And when these large global trade shows are hosted in Las Vegas, the destination has benefited from air carriers scheduling temporary additional flights and larger size aircraft from select international markets. The flexibility and collaboration with our DHS counterparts have been vital to facilitate these flights and accommodate the demand for these large shows. On the leisure front, the expanding breadth of sports and entertainment will continue to draw visitors from across the globe. In December, Las Vegas was awarded and named host city for Super Bowl 58 in 2024. In March, Las Vegas and Formula One jointly announced a new Las Vegas Grand Prix for the 2023 race season. And as context, each Grand Prix is comparable to the size of a Super Bowl. With Vegas, Formula One will now have 23 races in 21 different countries. Our event here is expected to attract over 170,000 visitors from across the globe and drive additional tourism above and beyond race week. These marquee and high-profile events not only drive incremental visitation, they bring a very affluent traveler to market. These events often drive an increased demand of private aircraft on already peak travel periods. In summary, Las Vegas is poised to continue to grow. With domestic visitation well on its way to pre-COVID volumes, international visitation must be our focus to ensure success and ultimate recovery. And this is a team effort. Our job at the LVCVA continues to be to drive demand to this incredible destination, and I'm thankful that our partners in Congress, including Congresswoman Titus, are actively engaging to ensure resources, staffing, and innovative processes and practices are needed, allow our federal partners to keep up with our growing demand. The LVCVA works in close partnership with Harry Reid International Airport and Director Rosemary Vasiliadis. We're grateful for our partnership and our common goals of not just returning but growing international visitation. As a united team, all of us can build the Las Vegas economy back even better, supporting more visitors, more jobs, and more economic impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now ask Ms. Vasiliadis to summarize her statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Thompson, Representative Titus, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to share my views on how to improve the flow of passengers at U.S. airports. Given my role as Director of Aviation at Harry Reid International Airport, or LAS, I will emphasize my experience with travel in Las Vegas. However, my points will generally apply to the needs and challenges at airports across the country. I also appreciate your willingness to hear testimonies from my colleagues representing U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the Transportation Security Administration, and the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. Our partnership here in this town is unprecedented, and our continued cooperation is critical to the success of the travel industry and the millions of value customers we each serve. This is a great time for air travel, and a particularly exciting time for those of us in Las Vegas, as so many big attractions return, as you just heard, or our communities, or join our community's always busy events calendar. Before the pandemic, nonstop international air service was a great success story. And to reiterate the chairman's opening remarks, passengers flying to Las Vegas from outside the country increased every year from 2011 through 2019, peaking at nearly 3.8 million flyers both in 2018 and 19. These are remarkable numbers for a point-to-point destination that differs greatly from traditional U.S. gateway airports such as those in Atlanta, Chicago, LA, or New York. In 2019, LAS had nonstop service to and from 12 different countries spread across 4 continents. Then came COVID-19, and all of that disappeared almost overnight. Thankfully, our traffic is in recovery. As you heard, we now enjoy nonstops from Canada, Mexico, Panama, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Germany, and Switzerland. We'll also welcome back South Korean flights in a few weeks and hope to add more markets later this year. Last month, our final numbers of international passengers at LAS totaled more than 200,000, a huge jump from the 31,000 we reported in April of 2021. And we do have high hopes for this summer's travel season, but our success will require active leadership from the Department of Homeland Security to ensure our guests do not experience delays caused by staffing shortages. Despite significant increases to the cost of airfare, traffic at LAS is finally nearing pre-pandemic levels. We need a full complement of CBP and TSA staffing for Las Vegas to both recover and further grow its core economic base. So to this end, I will propose a few specific suggestions. First, provide funding to increase CBP staffing levels at U.S. airports in order to meet current and future needs. I urge the Congress to pay for new CBP officers to handle expected growth. Research from the Airports Trade Association shows CBP's workload staffing model already reveals a shortage of nearly 1,000 officers across the system, and we anticipate those staffing shortages can soon worsen. Separately, LAS is not a 24-hour port. We need CBP to help us ensure new international service can be accommodated. We have recently experienced carriers asking to schedule arrivals outside of CBP's operating hours in order to maximize their connecting opportunities and fill more seats on U.S.-bound flights. As LAS looks at new markets in Asia and the South Pacific, flight patterns into the Western airports suggest we will receive even more requests to arrive outside current port hours. As we recover, CBP needs more flexibility to accommodate such requests. Lastly, the airports applaud Congressman Titus and the members of Nevada's delegation for their recent bipartisan letter to the president asking him to fully exempt vaccinated air travelers from pre-flight testing requirements. As already discussed, we know that once the United States eliminates this testing, international traffic will jump instantly. This again begs for CBP officers at U.S. airport and for keeping CBP airport staff at airports and not the southern border. We also need Congress to provide sufficient funding to expand biometric exit solution at airports. Pilot programs are in place at select U.S. airports, and as a few of you saw, and I'm so proud to report, LAS is leading the way in this area. But airport facilities were not designed for the needs of a fully biometric exit program, nor does CBP's staffing model account for officers to implement 100% biometric exit programs. Also, I asked Congress to provide dedicated funding for CBP to expand and promote global entry and nexus and related tried and true technologies to improve passenger facilitation and security. Also provide funding for the number of transportation security officers, or TSOs, and the technologies needed to screen passengers and baggage effectively and efficiently. TSA's resource allocation plan demonstrates thousands of additional TSOs are needed to provide adequate staffing at both these critical operational areas. Also, stop diverting TSA user fees to utilize other federal programs as called for in the administration's budget request. 9/11 passenger security fees now go to the Treasury for other uses. This is money TSA could otherwise use to hire additional TSOs. Also, ensure TSA has the funding to upgrade or replace explosive detection system, or EDSs. Many airport systems are outdated and must be replaced. Thankfully, LAS has already received federal money to begin these replacements, for which I am grateful. Still, I recommend a prohibition to prevent TSA from redirecting any unused EDS funds towards other programs until all eligible airports receive full reimbursement. And believe it or not, finally, ensure TSA continues to staff airport exit lanes and meet the obligations to the law enforcement officer, or LEO, reimbursement program, rejecting the administration's attempt to eliminate these programs and shift the full burden to airports. We appreciate Congress's continued effort to ensure TSA abides by the provisions in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013, which specifically directs the agency to monitor exit lanes. Likewise, as security threats in public areas continue to evolve and TSA imposes additional requirements on airport law enforcement officers, we need Congress to fully support and fund LEO reimbursement programs. So these are just a few suggestions, and I appreciate your willingness to travel to Las Vegas to hold this hearing at Harry Reid International. This airport provides a $35 billion annual economic benefit to the community and supports, directly and indirectly, nearly 25% of all jobs in Southern Nevada. My peers and I will continue to work together to provide travelers with a world-class experience each time they fly, but I truly believe my proposals will allow us to continue our recent success. I thank the committee again for this opportunity to testify.
I thank the witness for that testimony. I'll remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the witnesses. I'll now recognize myself for questions. Let me thank both of you ladies for your excitement about the job you do, and the fact that you have pretty much said, in spite of the last 2.5 years or something, the numbers appear to be going in the right direction. And with a little help from Congress, we can do even more. So, Ms. Wick, can you explain to the committee and to the public at large who are viewing this why a good experience at an airport is important to tourism like a city like Las Vegas?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, Chairman. A trip begins with the moment that you book the trip. It's the excitement that builds inside you, the looking forward to what's going to happen. And it happens the moment you leave your door and you arrive at the airport to come to Las Vegas. And making sure that the process is seamless and frictionless for travel is incredibly important because we want these visitors to return. We want them to have a great experience from the moment they leave their house to the moment they leave our destination. We don't want an amazing trip to be ruined by a bad experience on their way out of the market. We want to make sure that it's, again, seamless and frictionless for every traveler.
Well, so we're at the airport. Ms. Facilitas, can you explain how you work here at the airport to make sure that that's exactly what happens when people come to this airport?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the question. Our motto here at the airport is we are the first and last look of Las Vegas. We are part of that experience that Kate just mentioned. From the time that door opens from the jet bridge to the time it closes back, people are choosing to come to Las Vegas. What we do is we host a discretionary type of customer. We're not a transfer airport. We're not a big hub for the large carriers. We're an origin and destination. They come to Las Vegas, they leave Las Vegas. And most of our visitors are on the leisure side of the categories. And so again, they choose to come here, and we want that experience from the very get-go to be the one that they have chosen to and strive for, and then they come back. You know, so we want it smooth, we want it seamless, but we want it to be part of Vegas.
Well, thank you much. One of the things we tried to do in Congress was to address the pandemic in a responsible manner, to work with state and locals so that those who did travel would be protected, and those who worked in travel and entertainment industry or just in general, they be protected also. So do you think the COVID-19 protocols for Las Vegas proper worked? And is there anything else that you see that we should have done or could do going forward?
Thank you for that, Chairman. Las Vegas worked closely with local and state government to make sure that we were creating a safe environment to welcome visitors. Everybody had a different level of comfort traveling during the pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that we were following CDC guidelines, all scientific recommendations on how to provide that safe experience. We did that. We actively communicated that, and we came out of the pandemic with a stellar brand reputation of making sure that we were taking all of the facts into consideration and creating experiences that we knew our visitors wanted, but wanted to feel safe about having during this time frame. So it was a challenging 2 years, but we leaned into it, and through partnership, we made sure that we were actively developing these guidelines and communicating them to ensure that our customers knew what to expect when they arrived.
Thank you. Ms. Facilitas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also looked at it as, again, it started here, and what we started with, being that our town was closed for a period of time, although airports were still open, we still had airline crews go through. We certainly had medical staff being transferred around the country. We had PPE coming through our airport and to our city. And we knew we needed to start with our employees. We thought if our employees feel safe, then when we open back up and our visitors come back, the visitor's gonna feel that. So we had a very, very comprehensive, very visual invisible program of cleaning and disinfecting. We actually had our own LAS, Roadway to Recovery, and we had it in the different phases of what we needed to do from messaging, and you probably still see some stickers on the floor and throughout the terminal. And we did it Vegas style because we knew when people came back, they were choosing to come back to Las Vegas and they want Vegas. And so we did it with a little bit of flair, poker chips, all, all the usual identifiable type of things. But we were ready, and I do think that our numbers show that it worked, because our leisure traveler, for us here at the airport, our leisure traveler has surpassed 2019 leisure category.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Correa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Ms. Titus, thank you for the most important hearing. This information applies really well to my district, so again, thank you very much. Ms. Wick, in your testimony, you mentioned that international travel has lagged behind domestic travel in terms of recovery. Can you tell me any specific reason?
International travel has lagged for multiple reasons. One, just different states of COVID outbreaks globally, and the roller coaster of the pandemic and where it's hit at different times. Number two, the lack of confidence on getting to a destination, being stuck in a destination. Just the pandemic created a lot of unknowns, and I think travelers decided to just wait and see what was going to happen.
Let me interrupt you.
Sure.
That lack of confidence, I've seen that at airports where families are there. For some reason, they're stuck because of the test. The test is too late. It's 48 hours. They got it in 30 hours, and they're stuck. Mm-hmm. It's a horrible nightmare. And so I'm trying to figure out, a prior panel spoke to the fact that we're moving from a test to a vaccination scenario where if you're fully vaccinated, it's a different situation altogether. This should help, don't you think?
I personally agree with that. I've seen some of our trade shows adopt that as well, where you can show, you can pre-register for a trade show, initiate that you have your full vaccination status, and then it's easy for you to come and go within
I was
the
here
trade
for
show.
the Electronics Association a little while ago, and I thought that was good. It was just sad that the turnout was not what it's been in the past, and more important, primarily because of the international participation. But if that is a fact, if we can make a difference there, again, I'm going to come back to the same question I asked the prior panel, which is, what can we do to get the message out that if you're fully vaccinated, then you shouldn't have issues coming or leaving?
Mm-hmm. Partnering with U.S. Travel Association, partnering with Brand USA, we have international offices that we are reinstating across the globe to help us actively market Las Vegas. It comes down to what many of my colleagues here today have talked about, a messaging campaign, making sure that international travelers know we are open, we're open for business, we're open safely, and they can access us safely. That is absolutely the message to get across that we're working on.
What other factors were you going to elaborate on before I interrupted you?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Ms. Vasilada, is the same question. Glad that never happens to me.
Yeah, okay, so my mic isn't working, but I'm a very loud person. I do believe that the consistency of the rules will be very, very beneficial. So as I mentioned, our Nevada Congressional Delegation, Congresswoman Titus, letter to the president, let's get rid of the layers and have fully vaccinated, thank you, being the overriding requirement, I think will help tremendously. And it will be consistent with many other countries that we could go to, and that will, I think, also give a veil of ease like we have seen at conventions when vaccinations are required.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wick, did you recollect any of those factors yet?
I support what my colleague spoke about. I think it's really about identifying what the barriers are for travel
Consistency,
and
one
eliminating
rule,
them.
so to speak.
Correct. Consistency and eliminating barriers and friction, and let's try to make it as seamless as possible for visitors to get here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Thank you. And one of the other things is repeat business as you look at this too. My experiences have been when I run into international visitors, you know, a certain percentage of them have been here before and they enjoyed the experience and they came back. Or I mean, so I think that's part of making the experience positive. And we obviously want to make sure that our government doesn't participate in not making it a positive experience. And that's why when they get here, you know, go through, make sure all the protocols for security and other things are met. But it shouldn't take 2-3 hours for me to prove who I am and that I've been vaccinated. And so I think that's where technology helps that process so much, so that, you know, you can get through in a matter of minutes. You say, woo, I like this. And I think that's the wow factor you want from a visitor. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver, for 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I was stunned by your numbers of the world's largest 20 hotels. Half of them are in Las Vegas. That's absolutely amazing. I understand it, but do the hotels, realizing that their business begins to take root when people land here at Harry Reid, do they participate in any kind of organization with the airport? Organization probably not the right word, but is there an ongoing discussion with or request from the hotel industry and the airport? Do you?
Thank you, Congressman. You know, the last 2.5 years have been very unusual and unique. What we have normally done, unfortunately, was pause, but it is something that is back on our docket to do, which is we go out and we meet together, partnered with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. The airport meets with the major resort people and gives them an update. We did a little bit of it, you know, virtually. It was really hard, though, these past couple of years, but it is something that we are resuming later on this calendar year.
This question is probably, the interest probably almost exclusively in Washington, but, you know, we survived, albeit with a lot of bad memories and pain and heartache, but I think we're on the other side. Although there's there's reason to be concerned about this new explosion of new cases, but this is more of some information from my colleagues and me, not just this committee, but all over Congress. And that, do you believe that the people, the business leaders in Las Vegas understand where the payroll protection plan was originated, or was that just some, you know, we got some money from the government or somewhere to, you know, to do something? I mean, people, the industry was able to continue even at a lower level because of the PPP program. do you think people have any understanding of how that came about, or where the interest in doing something originated?
I think they do. Knowing the dependency of tourism on Las Vegas, all of our resort stakeholders worked very closely with state government on understanding what resources were available, how to weather this storm. We are actually funded, the LVCVA is funded partially by a room tax, and so we work closely with our resort partners to understand what are those barriers, how do we work together, how do we bring this pipeline of tourism back. And so I know there was a lot of dialogue between state and local government along with the resort corridor on how to maximize all the resources that you guys were fighting for them.
You asked the question. I mean, they have a lot of contact with the state government and probably don't understand that all the money that went into the state government was voted on by the people sitting at this table. And we find that that's a problem. I chair the housing subcommittee, and we send money into the state and then into cities. And as a former mayor, I was mayor of Kansas City. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent every year by cities, including Las Vegas, where they receive money as an entitlement city that came through the federal budget, and people have, all the people who benefit, probably less than 1% have any idea where the money originated. I mean, many of them may think, well, the state gave it to us, or somebody out there gave it. And then as a mayor, I can tell you, mayors call press conferences and announce big projects and get praised for something they had nothing to do with. Okay, I'm not upset, but I'm just telling you that, you know, I think the people here saved this country, and probably 99% of the country has absolutely no idea, and so they can feel comfortable in hating the federal government. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, but it was the right thing to do,
Yes,
Mr. Cleveland.
it was. Yes,
So all of us are Americans, and clearly our government has a responsibility, especially in times like the pandemic, to step up and do the right thing. So my conscience is clear that that investment through the PPP program and others was absolutely necessary. The support we gave to the travel industry, especially airlines, I mean, you know, it was, well, it helps them survive. I mean, it was tough. So, Chair recognizes the young lady from Las Vegas for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. It was not just the airlines. It was the restaurants, all the ancillary businesses that we saved. The restaurants, we saved the shuttered venues. We sent all that money. Nevada got an awful lot of money, $1 billion more than we would have, because we included unemployment in the formula, not just population. But I can tell you, there are a lot of people out there cutting ribbons and holding up big checks that they got from us, and they forget to invite us to the party. But I'm kind of inclined to agree with the preacher. But back to my questions. I'm really glad, Ms. Basiliadis, you mentioned about global entry and about the need for more flexibility to get people there on off hours, because I thought the answer to my question was a little optimistic or a little rosier than the actual situation is. So I think we do need to work on that. And talking about foreign travelers, not just for business, but we found here in the West, when they stay longer, they kind of do a loop. They come to Las Vegas, they go to the Grand Canyon, they go to San Francisco, and then they go visit Mr. Correa down at Disney World. And if we market ourselves as part of that loop, I think that's a way to appeal to foreign travelers. I hope that we're doing some of that. I want to go to the smaller airports though. Anytime there's a big fight or now a big ball game or a big concert, a lot of people fly in here on their private jets. Now you oversee the smaller general aviation airports in addition to Harry Reid. Can you talk to us about the security there? I know that they put out some kind of guidelines several years ago. How does that work? Is it effective? Do we need to take a look at that?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I appreciate the question. The general aviation airports do operate under different security rules. So being that they are not commercial airports, it does not have TSA located there. It is a private business type of operation where you can hire a quarter share, people have their own planes, you can fly on somebody else's, smaller type of aircraft that's not on a scheduled basis. So there's security in the system overall per se, but it's not the same type of check-in going through a checkpoint that you see at commercial airports. So the operation's a little bit different. But as you mentioned, with special events, it is a whole new world for us of what type of activity that we are getting due to special events. So for the Raider games and really any professional sports, there are separate type of security rules for a team to come in. As they do. Their aircraft's usually rather large, so they do operate here at LAS.
Those Raiders fans aren't really like your ballet crowd, are they?
They are very passionate about their team.
Well, so are the guidelines that were put out by TSA several years ago for these smaller airports, are they adequate, or with the new scene, do we need to look at upgrading those, or?
Thus far, they seem to be working. I don't have any examples of something that got us into a situation. Security is layers. There's all different layers from the time a person, makes a reservation, for commercial versus making a reservation for a private. There are measures that are taken. And I'm happy to report that we have not had any incidents due to lack of any of those layers.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Dimmons, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of our witnesses for being with us today. Ms. Wick, I heard you say loud and clear that you have about 20,000 more hotel rooms than Orlando. I represent Orlando and represent the Orlando International Airport. So what I heard was we have some work to do in Orlando, and we're going to be busy doing that work. I just want to talk about, as we talk about trying to get back to where we once were. And as I heard both of you talk about the experience and how important it is, of course, we say that the experience begins, as you indicated, Ms. Wick, once you book your flight, and certainly once you arrive to the Orlando International Airport, the experience begins there. And we've certainly done a tremendous amount of work to make that happen. We are currently about 95% of our 2019 passenger volume. And so we still have some work to do. I know that, this is occurring all over the nation, but you mentioned there are different states of COVID outbreaks and people find themselves stuck in particular places. Have you seen, Ms. Wick, any best practices at various localities or airports that could be implemented throughout the nation? Or anything that you've seen post-COVID?
I think thank you for that question. The number one best practice is just communicating upfront, setting out expectations of what's required from the traveler and where and how to meet those requirements. And that communication can come directly from air carriers, it can come from the hotels themselves, and it can come from the destination. But it is important to make sure that expectations are clearly communicated in terms of what is required from travelers.
Thank you so much for that. Ms. Valasadis, I hope I didn't mess your name up too badly, but thank you so much for talking about the importance of the law enforcement reimbursement program and how important it is to have sworn law enforcement officers at the checkpoints. I was assigned to Orlando International Airport as a police captain for a number of years, and that particular position pre 9/11 and certainly post 9/11 is so very critical. So thank you for that. But you also talked about the importance of overall staffing with TSA and CBP and trying to get back again to that normal place. Have you also seen any particular issues post-COVID as it pertains to airline staff or airport staff in terms of helping us move back to or even exceeding our passenger loads and creating that experience kind of environment that we all need? Any challenges there as well?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Well, I guess that's my button that you
That's
pressed.
your button. Yes, ma'am.
Tremendous
Designed for
issues.
you.
Starting with the airlines, we read about that twice, 3 times a week, from their pilots and crews. Now it's gone down to the trainers for pilots and crew members, to all the ancillary services that airlines must supply. And one that comes to my mind here at this airport is wheelchair pushers. So there's an FAA mandate that airlines must provide wheelchair and special need services, and airlines are just not getting people to be able to fill those positions. And it has taken a tremendous toll on that experience. It's been very, very hard at an airport. You know, airports were essential services, so we were all open. We had to come to work. Still had to fulfill all the requirements of staying safe, social distancing, all of that type of things. But we still had to have some concessions open. Airlines had to have ticket agents. Airlines had to have baggage handling crews. Airlines had to have maintenance. All of that has not recovered yet. And you see it with the delays. We saw it last month where airlines responded to the need, the pent-up demand, certainly, to Las Vegas, and then they canceled. But that was a nationwide issue. They canceled these flights because they simply did not have the staffing to be able to accommodate all of those flights. That, unfortunately, is continuing today. Not the cancellations. They finally got their schedules down to a reasonable operating day, but what they're able to offer, the amenities that you get, and I'm sure the esteemed committee flies a lot, you get nothing. Catering, every part of that experience is not up to what it used to be. So airports, I know for us, because we're part of the Las Vegas experience, we work with our concessionaires tremendously to make sure that passenger can get a drink, can get something they can bring on the plane. But it's not easy. Our concessionaires are not being able to hire at the same pace. It's very, very hard with the mentality of telecommuting. You can't telecommute at an airport. You have to have frontline people. You have to have real people at an airport to service that traveler.
Gentle
Okay,
ladies,
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
thank you, gentle lady. Time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentle lady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
Chairman,
Ms. Jackson Lee, you recognize.
thank you. I'm trying to unmute, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so very much. Let me thank you for this
I think
important
we're
hearing. I
we're
don't
having
think that
some.
we recognize all of the involved, the Homeland, even in the act. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Well,
Hello?
not well. Try it again.
I will. Let me start by thanking the chairman for this hearing and also Congressman Titus for bringing us to this important issue and the witnesses that have already spoken, including our witnesses dealing with DHS and particularly in dealing with the procedures that will help international travelers. That is a key element to the economic survival of cities like Las Vegas. This is an important leadership role that Congresswoman Titus is now playing to help this city and as well to bring this attention of how we can address the question of the economic aftermath of the pandemic and how do we ensure the traveling public has the necessity, the needed documents in a way that can be processed. So I want to raise a question to both of you. Has Las Vegas seen an increase in international tourism in 2022, which we hear that there is an implosion of travel, certainly domestically? And first let me have you answer that question. Have you seen a growth? Do you expect that growth to exponentially grow over the next couple of months?
Thank you for your question. We are tracking to be recovered, hopefully by end of this year from an international perspective. But from a Convention and Visitors Authority perspective, we are looking at the international segment for growth, not just about recovery. And so we are working closely to make sure that we're driving demand and that we want to ensure that we can capitalize on the demand and make sure that we can accommodate the demand that we are driving. Just this year, we've hosted net new events to the destination, including NHL All-Star Game, NFL Pro Bowl, NFL Draft. We announced the Super Bowl. I mentioned we announced F1. We are trying to line up our event calendar and our trade show calendar to make sure Las Vegas is the #1 destination. And so, yes, we are on track to recover, but we have our eyes on growth. And that's what we appreciate. This congressional delegation has moved hurdles to enable the recovery to happen thus far, and we look forward to partnering with you to keep that going, and we are thankful for those efforts.
In the course of international travel, do you see the need for continued information about COVID rates, and do you foresee further travel restrictions? We do know that there may be an uptick in the fall, and what can we do as members of Congress to help that the period that may see an uptick, that you continue in growth and economic recovery?
I think we have the tools in our toolkit in terms of we know mask wearing works, we know vaccination works, and we know testing works. And so working with the airport and our congressional delegation on what that correct balance of infrastructure and guidelines are, and making sure that my job is to communicate that out to make sure that visitors know what to expect and how to have the best experience possible here. So it's about figuring out what is the best protocols that then we will communicate out.
Well, clearly, I believe that you all at the forefront of travel and the increase in travel, cities like Houston that are growing in that area can utilize and model themselves after how you address these questions of increased travel, particularly in the midst of what will seem to be a continuing engagement with the pandemic and maybe even other infectious diseases. And we'll try to work in expediting documents, but more importantly, in collaborating to ensure that the economic recovery continues. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you very much.
Gentlelady yields back. Let me thank our witnesses for their testimony on this panel. Obviously, you bring us good news. Las Vegas and surroundings are on the way back. As members of Congress, we want to be full participants in facilitating that way back. I want to yield time to the gentlelady from Nevada who invited us to come and hear the story about the challenges and how it was met and how we as members of Congress can be helpful in that process.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's not an easy thing to take a congressional committee on the road, but this really meant a lot for you to bring us here. And the members who joined us, thank them too, and the airport for hosting us. You know, I wanted you to hear Las Vegas' story because it is a success story. We are a very resilient community. We came back from the problems with the housing crisis about 10 years ago. Now we're coming back from the COVID crisis. And so our resilience, I think, can serve as an example to other communities that are now trying to recover, especially those in the whole tourism realm. We think about tourism often in a secondary way, but it is such an important part of our economy, and every place in the country has something somebody wants to see. It's a historic site or a beautiful natural scenery, or it's the world's largest ball of twine like they have somewhere in the Midwest. So tourism really does affect every community. But when your economy is so based on hospitality and tourism, we are hit harder than other places whenever there's a dip in the economy. So hearing the best practices, hearing the challenges we still face, hearing how government works with the private sector, all of those are really key factors to recovery. So I'm so glad that y'all were here to tell us that story, and so glad that my colleagues got to hear it. Thank you,
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you very much, and let me say you've been a gracious host to the committee. And you can invite us back to Las Vegas at any time. Let me remind the members of the committee that they might have additional questions for our witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. The chair reminds members that the committee record shall be kept open for 10 business days. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.